So, what we're going to be talking about today is thriving in the changing world of AI. Okay? And we know this is a changing world, right? We have definitely come here, and AI is here, right? You can't look at the news and not hear about ChatGPT. I've talked about this at some of the frontiers of consciousness a little bit. And I'm not going to go too deep into that today. I want to look more at kind of the Unity teachings about how we can use what we know to be true to be able to respond, to be able to make this a world that works for all, and to be able to thrive in that ever-changing world. And I was just noticing today, you know, I know we don't say that every week, which I think is good, because we always would say that, and sometimes it loses meaning, but that song we have, isn't it the same thing? We're saying, my life begins for me today. We're changing to thrive in a changing world. And that's something that we can bring with us. So I'm going to start with a few videos of science fiction that has become science reality. Now, I will say on this first video that I'm going to show you here, when I was trying to find a video, by the way, you'll see I actually did this whole thing using ChatGPT to help me create today's service. And I wanted ChatGPT to help me find a video of Star Trek where Captain Picard, who's very philosophical, was like using the computer in a positive way. And every time it would tell me, oh yeah, this episode has him doing that, then I would go to YouTube, buy the video, watch it through, and I spent so much wasted time this morning trying to find it, and it was always wrong. It never got it to me. So I'm going to show you a classic Star Trek video instead, which kind of looks at where technology was and where technology is going to into the future. And I always do this wrong. It's like stage left, stage right, and is going to in the future. And with that, I want you to be able to see where not too far in the future, and maybe get a little laugh out of this. Okay, so this is from the original Star Trek movie, where they go in time.
Computer?
And can you turn the lights off for a moment to make this more visible for everybody?
Hello, computer.
Just use the keyboard.
Keyboard. How quaint.
Okay, so we can turn the lights back on briefly. Be going up and down, but we want to make sure that's visible there. Okay, so as you can see from that example that, can you turn the lights back on, Riley? Oh, there we go. Okay, good. I think they have it, you can do the meditation lighting for me, okay, when I do the video. That works out really well. Will we be there soon? Are we going to be thinking, I mean, like our kids, people who are born right now, when they finally get to a computer, they're going to be thinking they're going to be talking to the computer. That mouse will be really the way that they're seeing it. We are that close to Star Trek. And just to kind of give you an example of this, there is an application right now where you can talk to ChatGPT, and they've actually sometimes been able to give ChatGPT a personality. And so this next little video clip is going to show that. Okay, yeah, go there. You can stay there. Just click on that. And it's the second one at the top. Nope, second one. And just click play. We're already at the right spot. Lower corner, right down. If I had a touch screen.
Just pick something.
Okay.
Well, seeing as you're a robot, I don't know if you have a preference for drinks, but how about sticking to water? It's good for you, and it won't give you a sugar crash like soda would.
This is asking what he should drink. Now he's typing in the thing.
Was super realistic as well. Very cool. Now,
okay, we're going to stop it here. At the very last minute, I had this all queued up, but we kind of had some technical difficulties. Although that reminds me of something, and this is the question we're going to have. You know, to err as human, if you really want to mess things up, get a computer involved. So we're going to have to see, because everything that's happening with ChatGPT, as I'm going to talk about, it's all the collective humanity. It's all of what we have put in there. It doesn't have anything but what we have. Now, it can combine it in new ways, and we're going to talk about the positives and negatives of that. But when I saw this one right here, and it was just really brief, but this was a very snarky response. And so we're going to be at a point where we can talk to our Siri or whatever. We already have had that, right? But it's going to be so much more advanced with ChatGPT kind of stuff in the background. And it won't just be ChatGPT. There's also Bard from Google, and there's this, I don't want to call it an arms race, but there is in some ways this happening where all these competitions going to be getting this so much more powerful, so much more quickly. It's not just what's happening today. It's what's happening 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. That's what's going to be what we have to consider through everything we're doing. But this personality, there's another sci-fi I wanted to bring here, and I know many of you will not have this, but a few of you will be like me and uber nerds who were really into Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he had all these computers. He recognized, Douglas Adams recognized we would have, and we just had Towel Day, by the way, like 2 weeks ago, that computers, if they had personalities, they might be really annoying. So let's play this little clip. This is the only clip I could find. It's not quite as good as I want, but we'll see two different computers with personalities here. So go ahead.
Computer, we don't want to go to
Up the volume a little bit, please.
Oh,
I'd love to, fella, but wouldn't you know it, my guidance system has been deactivated.
Oh, come on!
I'm sorry about that, but it wasn't my
What are you
fault.
doing on the spaceship? But
Marvin, I've been talking to the ship's computer.
And?
It hates me.
So that was Eddie the shipboard computer, who's always happy, no matter what's happening. Oh, I can't go there right now. And by the way, if you use ChatGPT, that's how it always is. Even if you say, hey, tell me something that's not so great, it'll say, I'd be happy to. You have a great idea. It really doesn't want to critique you too much. Although you can ask, one of the things we'll get to is you can ask it for differing opinions, which is very valuable. And last but not least, one of the ones that probably was our first exposure for many of us. For me, it wasn't. This came out kind of before I was really into movies. But the original is 2001 Space Odyssey and HAL. So we're just going to look at a little bit of this. And let's go ahead and put those lights down for this one. And let's go ahead and play that.
Evening, Dave.
How you doing, Hal?
We can turn the volume down on
Everything's
this one
running
a little
smoothly.
bit.
And you?
Oh, not too bad.
Have you been doing some more work?
A few sketches.
May I see them?
Sure.
That's a very nice rendering, Dave. I think you've improved a great deal. Can you hold it a bit closer?
Sure.
That's Dr. Hunter, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, not at all.
Well, forgive me for being so inquisitive, but during the past few weeks, I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
How do you mean?
Well, it's rather difficult to define. Perhaps I'm just projecting my own concern about it. I know I've never completely freed myself of the suspicion that there are some extremely odd things about this mission. I'm sure you'll agree there's some truth in what I say.
Well, I don't know. That's a rather difficult question to answer.
You don't mind talking about it, do you, Dave?
Oh, not at all.
Well, certainly no one could have been unaware of the very strange stories floating around before we left. Rumors about something being dug up on the moon. I never gave these stories much credence, but particularly in view of some of the other things that have happened, I find them difficult to put out of my mind. For instance, the way all our preparations were kept under such tight security, and the melodramatic touch of putting Doctors Hunter, Kimball, and Kaminsky aboard, already in hibernation after 4 months of separate training on their own.
You're working up your crew psychology report.
Of course I am. Sorry about this. I know it's a bit silly.
We can stop it there, turn those lights back on. So when I saw this morning, I definitely had a little bit of fear. If you've seen this movie, you know that in the end, Hal tries to kill everybody on board. Turns out it's because Hal is given conflicting messages. They don't really go into this movie. I hear in 2010 Odyssey they go into that. But long story short, the famous line is, "I cannot do that, Hal," or I cannot do that, Dave, or the other one at the very end is where he, let me not feed back. The other one at the very end is where, he basically, Hal gets unplugged. So humans win in that one, right? Because we always have to have a happy ending. Reality, I think, normally is going towards that. And one of the things in Unity, of course, that we do is we don't ignore the potential problems, right? But we also don't say that that's our destiny right there. We also look at what we have within our control, and every time that we have a reaction to something, to be able to choose how we make the world. And this technology is here, and we're going to have a lot of group choices, especially coming into the world where it is, the social world where it is right now. So I want to talk a little bit about our choices we have from a psychological, neurological perspective, just a little bit, especially about fear. So if we can go to that next slide. We all have heard of the fight and flight response, right? That's the response that's very common. Now, there's also two more responses that very happen in nature, which is you also have the freeze response, right? Which is just standing still, or the ostrich putting its head in the sand, right? Just not doing anything. And that might be the easiest one right now, right? We can just say, oh, the news and everything that's happening in the world. We could just freeze to this. We could become very angry, and we could try to fight what's going on, and we do have a lot more of that. We know that people on all political spectrums are getting more violent and angry with each other instead of talking things through, and have a lot of different ideas about what truth is. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And then, of course, flight, right? And that's kind of like freeze in this case. Can we get away? We can't really run away from this world. Although I almost put another clip up here, but it did take me too much time. Whenever I see that, I think of run away, for the Monty Python fans here. Yeah, they were good at that. So, and then the last one actually that's they've been finding in nature is fawn, which is, if you have a cat, and you can see this in cats, they'll fight, they'll run away, sometimes they'll freeze, but sometimes one's the dominant and the other one will just roll on its back, right? So we also have the fawning, which is trying to show that we're, become friends with it or not be dominant or things like that. That's anything that has fear, and that's what we traditionally hear. But there's another side to the story about fear that we don't hear as much. And I want to talk a little bit today about, by the way, I can't skip this. Speaking of cats, it's good for me to look at my notes. I wanted to also show this video, and I couldn't find a video, but when I had a cat a long time ago, I still have cats, but his name was Gus. I won't tell you his full name because it would take up too much time. It was Octavius Augustus Brutus Catus Tyrannosaurus Rexus Puss in Boots Felix Neolinus Meow Purgos Gur, but you shouldn't call him Juniper. Don't ask. Okay, but long story short, one of the things I found interesting is I learned how to juggle a long time ago. And he would try to watch all these balls in the air at one time. And he'd be like, and then he just couldn't handle it and be like, just not going to pay attention. We don't want to be like that either, right? That's kind of like that freeze. Too much information can cause us sometimes to freeze and not sift through to the truth. And we're being bombarded with not 3 juggling balls of information, but millions, right? Every day. I think of the information superhighway. I know that was a bad metaphor when it first was used, but even when you're driving down the highway, literally it's an information superhighway, especially with all those new billboards that are, changing and everything. I mean, we are bombarded this way. And AI is going to increase that potential. So, going back to, are there other options that we can have in the face of fear? And I want to talk about somebody who I think is still very relevant, and I kind of, I think it's great that society continues to renew. We have the passing of one generation, a new generation coming forward, but we also have to not forget history. And one of the things that we had in the 20th century was, of course, World War II. And I do fear a little bit that Riley's generation and others will not have the memory. We don't have the great-grandparents as much around who are actually there fighting or in the camps. So one of the people, of course, I'm sure you've all heard of him and probably have read his book or at least heard of it, was Viktor E. Frankl, right? Who is well known for Man's Search for Meaning of surviving the concentration camps. But one of the quotes that he has that I think is very valuable and is so unity is, between stimulants and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And this is just as true today as it was when he was in the death camp. He had that response. We have our response. We're not in a death camp. We actually have so much more of a possibility of good. We just have to make sure we don't let that fear nature, right? I don't completely believe there's only fear and love, but those are definitely two opposite sides of many ways. We can't let our fear nature control us in the face of AI. We have to let our love nature be able to bring out the best of us while this is happening. So I want to talk about how that is actually natural. I'm going to talk about this psychological experiment. It wasn't really an experiment, it was a natural experiment. So let's go to the next slide here. Has anybody ever heard of patient SM? No, okay. There's always these patients with these two letters because they can't tell you their names because of, wanting to make sure they give them privacy. And this person's, and I think she's still alive, I forget. This person was born, was a gal, and she was born with damage to her amygdala, it's kind of in the center of the brain, that caused her not to feel any fear at all. And this was very dangerous for her, by the way. She'd been robbed and mugged, and she would never respond in a way that was fearful. She wouldn't run away. She wouldn't have the fight or flight or any of those responses. But what was interesting about this is, below the fear, there were still other emotions she could feel that she would always have happen. For example, she was visiting a store that sold snakes and spiders. And the overwhelming, because she couldn't feel any fear of these, and those are both things that we have a natural fear of, right? They're not even things learned fears. There's certain fears that are instinctual, and spiders and snakes, as Riley will attest to, are things that we tend to be scared of right away until maybe we can overcome that. But okay, yeah. See, he likes certain snakes now. But spiders especially. Still doesn't like spiders too much. So she would go to these spiders and she would just be so curious. And that's kind of interesting. If you think about it, we watch horror movies, right? People, why do they watch horror movies? If it's so scary, because there's another instinct of us to be curious. And so that's something that we can bring out to also she would have a knowledge of her fear. So we can have a knowledge without having to feel it, right? That's kind of what we do with mindfulness. And mindfulness also is an acceptance. And that's a really big thing. We do a lot in Unity, is mindfulness. I mean, Unity's been doing this for a long time. Of course, not as long as the Buddhists, but, we try to take the best from everything we can find, right? That's what I love about Unity. We can, when we're ill, we don't just say, my mind is the only power. We say, I am going to listen to doctors, and I am going to affirm my health, because between these two things, that gives me the most empowerment, right? That's what we do. And so that's why this technology, we can't just stick our heads in the sand, because this also gives us a potential of this. So kind of whenever we have these choices, I'm going to go one more thing on choices, then we'll actually talk about some of the responses we can actually have. There's a book that actually was one of my previous supervisors. I'm going to have to send him this talk, the video of it, because me and him didn't always see eye to eye on things. He's a really great person, but we just sometimes wouldn't communicate very well. But one thing that he shared with me was this great book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And I know this is probably not completely visible from everybody here, but this is a choice map. You can find this on the internet. It's called the Choice Map from Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And basically, whenever you run into something that might be fearful or bad, she says that there's two mindsets we could have. We could either have the judger mindset, which is what we jump into right away. Who's at fault? Is it me? Is it you? Who should I blame for this? And so the judger can start, although she shows that we can always have the chance to switch our lane. But if we go down judger, we just get into a judger pit. It's one thing I've always said about optimism, and even the study of optimism. Optimism doesn't mean that things are going to turn out all right, but pessimists have already lost, right? If you're a pessimist, if you don't think there's any chance, then there won't be a chance. So we have to have optimism. We have to have a way of being able to look forward on this. And that's what she has here, a learner mindset. You know, what assumptions am I making? What are the facts? What are the thinking, feelings, and wantings? Am I being responsible? What's possible? What are the choices? What's best to do now? So we can either start to blame, which is where our news loves to go. And why? You know, I'm not like anti-media. I do think all media do have some bias one way or the other. But the biggest bias they have is to sell. It's to sell us, right? It's to get us hooked. And it's easier to get people hooked to judger because that's the first mindset. But we can, of course, go higher and go to the questions of the learner mindset. And so with that, let's go ahead, and what I want to do is I want to go to, on the positive responses, and Dave, if you could do me a favor here, can you click on that one that's use AI for learning? I was going to change the order there, and I think I forgot to in the PowerPoint. There we go. So one of the things we can use AI for right now, and by the way, if you don't have ChatGPT, you can search for it. You can actually use ChatGPT for free, but I would recommend going to Bing. That's Microsoft's Google. Microsoft is really the one pushing this forward right now because they realized, despite everything Microsoft, they controlled the whole technology at one point, but the internet really kind of got them behind, and they never have caught up. And so if you haven't heard of Bing, that's because Google's been so good, right? We say we Google it, we don't say we Bing it. But if you go to Bing, they now have the option to basically use ChatGPT there, completely free. And it also has the ability to do what they call DALL-E, which is the ability to create images. Now, it's not necessarily even the best at creating images, but the things is, it's very powerful. Like, for example, I wanted to go to the lake recently to do some fishing, and I wanted to make sure the lake was full enough, and I just asked it, what's the level of Folsom Lake today? And it just told me. And then it cited its source. We'll talk why that's so important. And that's one thing I like about Bing over ChatGPT is right now ChatGPT does not tell you its sources. And I think that's going to be a big thing that we have to make sure even more so that we know the sources. So AI can be used for learning here, and it can be learned for learning when it's also used for bad things, because I do want to not neglect the bad. So one of the challenges about AI right now is trust. We know there is so much information going around, and it's hard to know what's true or not. One news media says this is true, the other news media says no, that's not true at all, right? And I have my beliefs about all that. I don't want to get into that today. But what I do want to say is it's even more important now because for example, the deep fakes have become so much easier to make, where you can have Donald Trump selling, I think I saw on the internet he was selling ice cream or something. I forget. It was something silly. But, you know, there have been a lot of deep fakes going around of politicians saying they're doing this or doing that. There have been people who've been phone called by a relative asking them for money with the voice of their relative, but it wasn't them. Okay? So the scam artists are going to be doing things very quickly here. And so that's why I have here trust but verify, because we have to make sure. And this is one thing I think, this was actually when Ronald Reagan was, you know, working with Gorbachev to disarm, right, to basically bring us to a peace, which I fear that sometimes we're not there anymore, all that work that him and Gorbachev did. But he kept hearing a phrase in Russian, which was trust but verify. It's a proverb. And then he used that, saying, hey, this is what we have to do with nuclear weapons. I trust you, but we need to verify. You know, they are not mutually exclusive. And it improves the trust if we can verify things, because then we really know who we're really talking to, what we're getting, and things of that sort. So one thing that I like about Wikipedia, people say, oh, Wikipedia, they could put anything on there, and that's true. You can't just trust Wikipedia inherently. But any good Wikipedia article, and there's a lot of them, they all will have citations where they have the footnotes, and you can click on there and get to the original source. It's worth taking that extra time. There's another great psychologist, sociologist, economist, Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a great book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And in that book, he compares really two kind of mindsets we have. The one that happens most of the time is what we call fast thinking. And fast thinking, you think, oh, that's great, I want to think fast. But fast thinking is the thinking that doesn't maybe always carry all the way things through, right? It's like, you know, where you take the milk out of the refrigerator and put it in a cabinet and then you're wondering where you put it. Am I just the only one? Okay, so that's our fast thinking. We are just on instinct. We take it out, we think, oh, it's food, and our mind will do this. It's how we can be driving and having a conversation, and we were supposed to make a turn, and I do this when I was driving home. I'd want to stop at my parents' house, but then I'd start listening to the radio or something, and boom, I'd be past their house. I'm like, oh, I meant to stop there, because I was on autopilot. That's what really our System 1 is about. Well, when we have scams especially, or these things that are sent to us, they send this on to people, they're trying to get us, whoever the original person was. It's not always the person who sends it to us, especially with things that we get emailed. Oftentimes, that was whoever originated that. That's the person who's doing it, and we're spreading it because we're all using System 1 to just say, oh, I need to send this quickly. There are times where System 1's important. I was talking about patient SM. She has almost died a few times because she couldn't run away because she didn't have that System 1 of fear. And System 1's not only fear. It's anything we do kind of instinctually, but fear is part of it. The only time I almost fell for a scam was when I was really tired. I got home at the end of the day, and I got an email about something being hacked, and then I realized, oh no, this right here is actually just a scam. And it used to be easier to know them because they would have bad grammar, right? Now they could go to ChatGPT and write up something really real. And they only have to do a little bit of research about you, and they can make it your name. That's called spear phishing. And it's going to become so much more easier for these folks to do this. That's the dangerous part. So that's why we have to stop, breathe, look up the information. There is rarely a situation where you have to act right in the moment. It's better. It's like, you know, the way that people say don't put your foot in your mouth on an email, just wait overnight. Even waiting, you know, you're really upset, but you're going to write that email that's going to cause this whole chain reaction and will not be a positive. So actually, speaking of that, if we can skip to the next one, yeah, Rumi's 3 gates of speech. So This is one where actually I didn't hear it first from Rumi. I have to give credit to Reverend Mark. A lot of what I'm bringing here today, I have to give him a lot of credit for. So, but he would talk about this. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And when researching this, at least through ChatGPT told me it came from Rumi is most well known, but it could have existed before him. And so think about that before you forward something on, especially now that we have AI here. When we're communicating, that's the choice we have with each other. So when we're talking about our personal choices, we have our choice about how we do. And if we ask ourselves those questions, take a deep breath, is this true? How do I know? That's the harder part. But there are things we can look at. There are things we can research. We can dive deeper. Sometimes that takes questioning our own beliefs, because that's the other thing they're going to do. They're going to try to use our own beliefs against us sometimes. They're going to, if they were spearfishing me, they might say, especially if they see this video now, they might say, oh, I can use Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something like, I don't know how they do it, but they could use my own beliefs, positive thinking, my belief of things like this. And in fact, I've seen some things that have tried to do that. Technology people, sometimes we have to be the most careful because we have the keys to various kingdoms and people want to get our passwords and things like that to be able to hack different places. So we're like always on the lookout. So I have to say, is it true? Is it necessary? If I send this on to somebody, is it going to really improve the world? Is it going to have a positive effect? Is it kind? So think of these things before you just forward something on. And I gave a website earlier also, more than just Wikipedia. It's still one, it's an older one. They haven't been able to keep up with all the different things out there, but it's called Snopes. And they do a good job overall of finding and telling you why. That's the other thing. If somebody tells you something, ask them why. Be like that 4-year-old. Why? Okay, why? In fact, there's a thing that they use in business sometimes called the 4 whys, and you go back 4 times to try to find the root cause of something. Actually, maybe it's the 5 whys. I forget right now. I'll ask ChatGPT later. And I'm actually serious about that. So I want to jump back to the slide I have briefly here of use AI to collaborate. Can we get to that one? There we go. Okay. One of the things that I have found as the positive, because I want to end on the positive here, not just mitigating the negative, but this whole talk right here, I did not by saying ChatGPT created it, because ChatGPT can create things. Yeah, you can just say, hey, write this or whatever, but that doesn't create anything really new. Now, maybe in the future it will. I don't know. But it allowed me to be able to bounce ideas off of it. And that was something that I did a long time ago when I was young, in my teen years and early adult years. I had a really good friend, Dave Deppner, and we would collaborate, and we'd come up with all kinds of great ideas. And that's why, probably part of that was why we started the first internet provider in Placer County way back in the day. So that was a great thing. And I felt I've been missing that because my interests now are, I don't want to say they're completely esoteric, but sometimes they're a bit esoteric. And they're not areas where maybe we have, it's not in the mainstream as much. I focus a lot on education and how we can improve education and looking at other ways that we haven't thought about yet. And I have found that ChatGPT for me is like an advanced Google. Because what I can do is when I did Google, I had to have the exact idea. If I didn't have the exact word, it would never be able to find it for me. But ChatGPT has now been able to take this where I can give it a concept. And this is the concept I have. Tell me what it is. And I've realized through my study of neurology that I have had most of my life a minor form of aphasia. Aphasia is where you can't say certain words sometimes. It becomes pronounced when a person has a stroke. So if a person has a stroke, sometimes it'll, not all strokes, but some strokes will target part of the area and a person can't speak anymore. Which is interesting because that also was a neurological, quick aside, that they find out there's two parts of speech in our brains. One's our normal speaking and one's our swearing, because the part that can be damaged for normal speaking, the person can still swear. True. So, which is why I didn't show one of the videos earlier of the really bad ChatGPT, because it was a little bit too much swearing for church here. But going back to this, if I can't remember somebody's name or who said what, I can just type in the idea and I can just be like, I think it was kind of like this. And most of the time, it'll come up with the right answer. Or if it doesn't, it'll say some options, or I can say, oh, but I want it this way instead, or something like that. So I can go back and forth, just like it's a person, and be able to have this conversation to be creative. And that is really something that I think can be empowering. I mean, if it's here right now, we have access to it. If we can't take the genie out of the bottle, I think we should try to learn as much as we can about it, make our choices as far as being in a democracy as much as we can to have laws, or as consumers to make choices. Don't ever forget the power of boycotts or things like that. If we don't like what some of the companies are doing, we should be able to say that. But also, while it is here, while we have it in our hands, use it to do positive. And don't think, because I know it's kind of weird, I'm one of the younger ones here, right? I always thought it was kind of funny, because I can't say this because my folks are here, but for a long time, sometimes when I was here, I'd be like, you know, I'm probably both the youngest person in here and the person who's the oldest member. Because I started when I was 3, younger than Riley, at the Auburn, theater, state theater, way back in the day. So I always thought that was an interesting kind of conundrum there. But don't think you're too old to do these things. I wore today my tie. This is, it's a little dirty, but this is a gal named Grace Marie Hopper. Grace Marie Hopper, she's actually considered one of the mothers of computing. And in fact, it was in her journal where they found the first computer bug. The first computers had switches and relays, and not like the electronics we had now. It was some electronics, but vacuum tubes. It looked like, more like those old Frankenstein movies, right? What they were doing. And one day, the computer stopped, which was not uncommon, because normally they'd have to pull out a vacuum tube and figure out which one blew. But it wasn't a vacuum tube, so they started looking at all the relays, and sure enough, a moth was stuck in one of the first computers. That was the first computer bug in her journal. Okay, we're a long ways from that. Why am I talking about Grace Marie Hopper? She did most of her big work, like she kind of wrote most of COBOL, or at least was the precursor to COBOL. She's considered that, which is now not as major of a programming language, but was a very major programming language, really moved things forward. So a lot of her work she did, and she also became a rear admiral in the Navy. She didn't start until her 50s, and she was still in her 80s when she was doing work for the Navy with computing. So if she can do it, we can do it, right? If we're here, we're breathing. And the other thing I will tell you right now from my study of neurology, there's really only 2 things that neurologists have found that builds new neurons in the brain. We know there's a lot of things that can damage your neurons. Alcohol, rock music. I don't know if rock music does. No, just kidding on that one. But there are 2 things that can build new neurons. Number 1 is physical exercise. So I'm trying to do that more myself all the time. But number 2 is diving into something brand new that you almost feel like a fish out of water, like learning a language or something like that. So learning about AI would be a good thing. If you kind of feel like a fish out of water with doing it, that will actually help you as you learn about it to stay younger and keep your mind sharp. Learning things we already know is good, but it doesn't cause as much, really not much neural growth as taking something brand new. It forces our brain to go there. So I just want to end on that. I hope everybody keeps learning. I don't have all the answers, by the way, but I'm an optimist that together, as a humanity, if we work towards it, we can have the great things because there are potentials. We could cure cancer. We could be able to do so much with AI. So let's work towards that. Thank you.
Imagine the power. If we could slow down the lights or lower them. Thank you, Riley. Our meditation lights. So today's meditation I've called My Inner Garden. The meditation I'm sharing with you today is based in part on Emily Cady's book, Lessons in Truth. Shut your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. Take a few moments to become aware of your breath. As you breathe in, feel the oxygen as it enters through your nostrils and fills your lungs. As you breathe out, follow your breath as it moves down through your body. Imagine the oxygen continuing down into your legs, through your feet, and into the earth below you. As you breathe in again, the earth returns the oxygen to you, letting it flow through you like a gentle ocean tide. Emily Cady states in her book, Lessons in Truth, that the indwelling presence of God is a place within us where our consciousness meets the Christ at the center of our being. It's a hidden place where no one outside of us can enter. It's an inner revealing of the Christ within us, through whom and by whom come life, health, peace, and power. The more time we spend in the silence, away from the noises and flurry of the outside world, the more conscious we become of God within ourselves. As we continue to immerse ourselves in the stillness, we realize our connection to the Spirit within our being, which provides us with an infinite supply of peace, love, and light. Our inner being, our sanctuary, our refuge. As we open our hearts and minds to the still voice within us, we become receptive to divine guidance and intuition. Our path toward our greatest desires and the power to make them a reality are manifested through our unity with Divine Mind. Think of our inner being like a garden. Let's affirm together quietly within ourselves. By going into the silence, I cultivate my inner garden. By going into the silence, I cultivate my inner garden. I give my inner garden the space, light, and nourishment it needs to flourish. I give my inner garden the space, light, and nourishment it needs to flourish. I shower my inner garden with love and gratitude. I shower my inner garden with love and gratitude. I let my inner garden be the enchanting place it was always meant to be for me. I let my inner garden be the enchanting place it was always meant to be for me. Let's spend some time in the silence, cultivating our inner gardens. In closing, we are grateful for this kind and loving spiritual community and for our many volunteers who give tirelessly of their time, energy, and talents in supporting Unity of Auburn. We are grateful for our beloved family and friends, for Unity principles and teachings, and for this glorious earth we live on. We keep in our hearts and pray for those of us who have requested prayer, including our fellow congregants who have placed their prayer requests and needs in our prayer chest. For this and so much more, we say, Amen.